The process of being involved in the criminal justice system is itself punishing. The whole system is about compliance. And when I think about that and I say that, it sounds like Jim Crow. It sounds like controlling the behavior of Black people. I have actually told clients, I remember telling Black clients as a public defender, when they've come in, with maybe, I don't know, drug possession charge, and then that escalated to a resist or an assault on a government official charge. I remember telling clients, don't resist, don't challenge police officers on the street. We'll handle it in court. Let me do that, right? Let me challenge the reasonable suspicion or the probable cause. And I did that without realizing the costs, the real costs to my Black clients of acquiescing to the unrestrained police discretion on the street, without recognizing that just the arrest itself causes harm. Separation from family, employment, housing, the cost of pretrial detention and bail, just having a criminal record. Even if you do win the suppression motion down the road, so much has already been lost. And most importantly, the erosion of dignity and the value of your life.
Right. And I remember my service hours had to do with Light the Night Walk, which is a walk for leukemia. I didn't have leukemia, but I did have Wilms tumor, which is a kidney cancer. And for my kidney cancer, I was stage 4. So I understood how the people walking on the streets and how fundraising for doctors for research, just it really makes the difference, and it really makes the impact, not only in the culture, but in the research itself. And so for my community service, that's what I did. And I remember I had this white male science teacher, and he looked me in my eyes and he asked me, was I joking? He asked me, was I joking about having stage 4 cancer? Like, as if the words of resilience and this little Black girl going from 18 months to 11 years old couldn't dare make it to where she is now, being the color that she is in the country that she lives in. And, at the age, I didn't understand entirely that it has a lot to do with his perspective on me and people that look like me. But then later, I started to connect the dots because he set me and a good friend of mine down. We're both Black girls. And he set us down and he said, you will never amount to anything. Like, you will always be the friend of the smart person. And he had no other reason to say this to us, but because we were who we are. And it is color, but it reaches beyond color, because it talks about the cultural difference between a person in America that grows up with his skin tone and a person in America that grows up with my skin tone. He couldn't.
One of the things that I try to focus on now is voter education. And one of the things that I see from suppression right now is that we really don't focus on voter education. We focus on campaigns, we focus on advocacy groups, we focus on candidates, but we do not focus on what the main focus is, which is voting. A lot of times during what we call GOTV time, which a lot of people are not familiar with, which means get out to vote. You'll see campaigns, you'll see candidates, you'll see organizations doing soul to poll events. You'll see them in Black, Latino, LGBTQ plus communities, doing campaigning, doing all these types of activities, taking pictures, rallying down the streets. And then once the election's over, they're gone. You know, I mean, they're not even coming back to pick up the yard signs that they left there. I mean, if you go to the Hidden Valley neighborhood during November, you'll see, you know, lines of rows of campaign signs saying, vote for this person, vote for this person, vote for this. But you won't see anything after that. Most of these people do not know what the next primary election date is.
I was 14 years old. Or 19 years old, rather. I was excited to vote for the first time. And when I arrived at the polls, I clearly remember the man who was at the check-in table, just said I couldn't find my information and I was turned away. I quite frankly, I found it really odd because I clearly remember getting my license 10 months prior to the election and registering to vote. So I was absolutely disillusioned and walked away and didn't return to vote for many, 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 many years. So as a young 19-year-old, I really didn't question it much. I just thought I probably made a mistake when registering. And if that happened today, I'm pretty sure I would handle it very differently. But I was young and just really didn't know any better. So as it turns out, later on, I found out that I was in fact registered to vote, but was inexplicably turned away. And I was absolutely enraged and just became totally disenfranchised. I didn't vote a majority of my 20s because of it. So instances similar to mine, they happen every single election cycle and they just go unquestioned. And to me, it's proof that we have so much more work to do when it comes to the voting rights for Latin Americans and all people of color. And unfortunately, that's just one example, but there's many other examples that affect the Latin American community. One that jumps out at me is that not until too long ago, information about registering to vote on the North Carolina Board of Elections website was not available in Spanish. Now, that's no longer the case, but it was a huge reason why so many Latinos and Latinas did not register to vote in North Carolina. Another terrible example of voter suppression is that Black and Latino voters who are successful at submitting an absentee ballot are 3 times more likely to be turned away than white voters in North Carolina.
And both the concerned citizens of West Baden and the Yadkin Riverkeeper have been pleading with the state of North Carolina for more than a decade to have exactly what's been described here be done, only to basically be ignored and trotted along. In some ways, I honestly feel like Alcoa and the Division of Waste Management are more pen pals than they are regulator and regulated. I mean, here we have a situation where a polluter came in, generated thousands of tons of hazardous waste each and every year, indiscriminately placed it at locations around where people were living. And if you see they also made a very conscious decision of where people were going to live. This was a company town. It's hard for me to imagine why the state of North Carolina has not acted more forcefully. The state of New York acted much more forcefully at a similar site in Messina, New York. When Alcoa shuttered its smelter, the Icelandic government had recruited them to go over there. The Icelandic government insisted that no spent potliner be buried there at all. And Alcoa agreed. They shipped their spent potliner from the Icelandic smelter that took all the jobs from the Alcoa Baden Works. That smelter actually ships that stuff to be recycled in England on ships. The English will take that and then turn that into heavy industry that recycles the spent potliner. So they have a no burial policy at Iceland in this new facility where they replaced all these jobs. And they left this facility, put concertina wire around it, and have been just playing pen pals with the DWM and DEQ, the state agencies, ever since.
Nobody cared if you had hogs. And so when she learned that the neighbor next door had built a hog farm, she didn't think anything of it. She didn't realize that the hog farm had thousands of hogs crammed into these sheds that never, as Mona said, never see the sunlight, never touch the dirt, and are excreting, 5 times the waste of a human being. And that's being slushed out into a giant open air cesspool. She had no idea about any of this until one day, the hog farmer, who ironically was related to her grandfather, Emmanuel, was actually born to a slave woman during the time of slavery, before emancipation. And Emmanuel's father was white, the planter. And so the hog farmer next door was actually a neighbor, was part of the Herring family on the white side of the line. He brought out one of those giant Jurassic-sized spray guns, the ones that Mona showed. And, Elsie and her mother and brother were out on the porch. I mean, this is, it's summertime, very hot down east. They don't have any air conditioning. The windows are open. They're out on the porch to catch the breeze. And this hog farmer goes away, and all of a sudden they hear and then see this giant rooster tail of spray go up into the air. And initially it's just kind of like curiosity. I mean, it doesn't look like water. I mean, it's liquid clearly, but it's this muddy pink color that's just gross. And then of course, what happened? I mean, the breeze caught it and brought it just a few feet. I mean, it was a couple dozen feet away onto their property. It got, I mean, this is the most putrescent scent that you can imagine. I mean, it got in their clothes, it got in their lungs. I mean, it started burning their noses. It got made their eyes water. All three of them ran inside, hot summer day, closing all the windows, closing the door, trying to escape the spray. Can't escape it. It's on them. It's in them. It's what Elsie would later describe many times in telling the story as the live scent of hog, which I think is like the most perfect way to describe it. And then, inside this newly formed prison of her ancestral home, she heard something, and it was on the roof. She looked up and realized that she was hearing the sound of droplets falling upon her mother's roof like rain. Now, Elsie had been able to make her way in the white man's world, and so she did not take this sitting down. She got on the phone. She started writing letters. She called the local sheriff in Duplin County, said, "Help me." Turns out he was a hog farmer. He didn't want to help. She reached out to the local soil and water people, and they basically, more or less do the industry's bidding. And so they didn't help. She reached out to state level officials, regulators, the governor's office, the attorney general. Nobody wanted to help until one